I'd like... moment. I'd like to call the meeting of the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee to order for August 6th, 2018. First item on the agenda is a call to order and the roll call and determination of a quorum. Call the roll, please.
Chairperson Cardinal, Vice Chair Justice,
Present.
Member Barrett,
Here.
Member Hanneman,
Here.
Member Kennedy,
Here.
Member Powell, Member Smith.
Here.
Quorum's present.
Okay. Item number 2 on the agenda is public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Carson City Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. We have any public comment? Please.
Severe mental disabilities, and this is a companion show to Visual Oasis that we have over in the courthouse. So I hope you get a chance to go see that exhibition too. The artist.
The essay that you have was written by two artists that have done a lot of work with people with mental disabilities, and they're going to be doing a talk with CCAI on September 19th. We're doing it at the Union in the back room at 6 o'clock. You're all, of course, invited, and they're going to be talking more about artists who, with these kinds of capabilities that make art. One thing I think that stands out about this work is that even though people have disabilities like this, they're still making a wonderful contribution to our culture, and I think they need to be applauded for that. The other exhibition we have currently is The Wind Calls. It's by student art from UNR. It's over in the Brick up through early October. We have a reception for this exhibition here on August 17th, and the UNR exhibition has a reception on September 7th. And of course, everybody's invited. So, are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Any more public comment? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, possible action, approval of minutes of the May 7th, 2018 meeting. I have a motion. Second? Okay. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Next item on the agenda is item 4A for possible action to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding funding for the Blue Line replacement through the Historic District. Lee?
Good evening. For the record, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director.
This item and the next item were placed on the agenda at the RAC Committee's request to get an update on a couple projects that have been funded in prior years. So this first one is for the replacement for the historic Blue Line. They were allocated $26,000 in fiscal year 2017 to remove and place the Blue Line. They literally replaced the Blue Line paint that's going down the sidewalk because it's broken and gets worn out, gets in need of repair. So as that recommendation went forward to the Board of Supervisors, the direction that the funding was awarded with the direction to look for opportunities to not use the paint and have that ongoing maintenance and look for other solutions for it. So there was a committee formed with Public Works, who would be in charge of the city right-of-way and actually doing the Blue Line, and the Culture and Tourism Authority to look for replacement, alternative method of doing that. And so I have in your report a little bit about that. Joel Dunn is here from the Convention and Visitor and Culture and Tourism Authority. Sorry, I haven't got used to the new name yet. Here to give a brief update on that. And with that, I'd just like to have him come up and give you a little bit about where they are on this project and have you ask any questions that you have.
Before we start, Lee, the first $26,000 was allocated in fiscal year 2016-17, so this will be the third year.
27, yeah, it's fiscal year 17, and we're now in fiscal year,
Well,
we're now in fiscal year 19, so yeah, that was,
Right.
that was two budgets ago.
So this will be the third.
Great.
Please,
Good evening. For the record, Joel Dunn, representing the CTA Board, and I'm still getting used to the name change, and now here we go again with another rebranding. So the committee that was formed that Lee mentioned between representatives of the city and the CTA, the decision was definitely made to no longer paint the Blue Line. It's been a maintenance nightmare for years. In fact, the majority of the people that have the experience still have a great experience on what was named the Blue Line, but they come back talking about the blue chips of paint that scattered over the west side of Carson City. The decision was not only to then eliminate the Blue Line, but to rebrand the experience, not naming it the Blue Line Tour, but we've rebranded it as just simply the Kit Carson Trail. I provided at the meeting tonight a couple of different handouts so you can see how we're marketing it. You've got first the two visitors guides. One, the green one, which was the events and outdoors for 2017-18. And fresh off the press, the new one, which is the yellow with the runners on it. I'm happy to say that the green one was named the #1 large publication in the state of Nevada by the Press Association. It's a new way of marketing our community. We do more storytelling. Instead of talking about a great museum, you get to meet the curator and why he chose that line of work. And in the latest one, the yellow one, we have a story on Deb Ottinger. Deb is a local artist that was instrumental in creating the look for the new map. And if you look through back onto page 15, you can see the story on mapping the city's history. And Deb's actually works for the city over at Public Works, did a fantastic job. I think she did a piece for the Chamber of Commerce, a rack card that was outstanding a couple of years past. So you can see that we've successfully rebranded the Kit Carson Trail, have not had a single person come in that's asked for the Blue Line Trail and been given the information for the Kit Carson Trail that had any problem with heading out the door and getting the experience. With that, I've also provided the old rack card with a new rack card that we have not finished yet. It's still in draft form. There's some tweaks on the artwork and also the folding, but I wanted to make sure you could see what we send out. Now, these will be handed out through certified folders at times. They'll be in the lodging properties. A lot of this information you as residents probably haven't seen unless you're here representing a lodging property. The majority of our marketing happens outside of 100 miles of Carson City. And I think we can continue to do a better job making sure that our community is aware of how and what we're marketing, and that's one way tonight coming in front of you. One of the biggest advancements that we made coming into, I think I left my phone back there. Grab my phone. We developed an app. Coming in 6 years ago, one of the top trends in visitors looking for information when they travel is either through their smartphone and then also to download an app. We created a Carson City app, Visit Carson City. If you haven't downloaded it, it's a free app. I'd recommend that you do. Even as a resident, it's certainly very useful. But what we added to upgrade the experience of the Blue Line is an audio component. So not only do you have the opportunity now to follow the maps, go from site to site, but you get a much more in-depth history through the mouth of, let's turn it up. Of course, my phone's not loading, but I turned off my phone so it wouldn't ring in here. I didn't realize the volume would come off. But each one of the locations has an audio component in the voice of a character from the home. So it's the voice of Samuel Clemens talking about the experience of the home. In depth, everyone gets a much better experience. I also, the concern was with a web-based app and a mobile phone, were we going to miss some of our demographics, some of our target market? The majority of the people that come into the visitor center and walk out the door to experience the Blue Line have a smartphone in their hand. So I'm also very comfortable that that experience is reaching most of our customers. So going back to then the signage, I think Lee mentioned that we're going to, with the removal of the Blue Line, have to be able to guide all of the people around for the experience. We'll work with Public Works, look at possibly having small little wayfinding signs on some of the street corners. But the map itself has all of the streets, it has the numbers. The bronze placards that the Visitors Bureau has set aside, and I think you mentioned nearly 3 years now, the budget to have that happen is nearly $40,000. We're going to put 43 placards on each one of the homes. Gives a little bit of history on it. It's a 12 by 16 placard. We're ready to move forward with it. We did wait through last year. The city applied for a SHPO grant, hoping that they'd be able to provide some funding for the signage. Unfortunately, they did not receive that grant. So when the city's ready to remove the Blue Line and have us purchase the placards and have them installed, we're ready to go. So any questions?
Yes, do you have a bid for what it will cost to remove the Blue Line? Because the original project was to, 3 years ago, was to remove and repaint the Blue Line. So this is a completely new project that we have not looked at. Number one, do you have a bid? And number two, you have the opportunity to go through NCOT, Nevada Commission on Tourism, for infrastructure grants. And that seems to me that this is much more their purview than RAC.
As far as the grants related to tourism, the opportunities once every 2 years. The last grant that we received from NCOT for projects related to tourism, not a marketing grant, we replaced all of the scoreboards at the Upper Centennial Complex. That's a pretty significant economic engine for our community. The window of opportunity right now, if we were to wait for the next grant cycle for Travel Nevada, it would push us off another year. If that's the direction that the RAC recommends and the funding's not provided, we certainly could move forward and wait for the time for that next grant cycle. But I certainly would like to see these in place for the 2019 season.
Well,
as far as the price of the removal of the line, I think that's the city's part.
Yeah, just to answer the first part of the question about the bid, I don't have the exact figure from Public Works. I know it's less than $26,000, but I'm not sure how much less.
Well, then I'm not sure what we're discussing.
We're giving an update on, so to add to the final of the update of the project, Public Works is prepared. I guess the agreement has been to wait for this other signage before removing the paint, but Public Works is ready to remove the paint when the signage is up. That's the latest I got from Public Works, consistent with what Joel said.
I think I'd recommend that if we're looking at the window of opportunity, we start the shoulder season in October. I don't think we get a lot of visitors that are looking to walk a 2-hour walk on our west side once the snow starts to fly. I'm sure that we could work with Public Works and get the installation by early May of next year.
Well, I would recommend that when all the information is in, that we relook at this, because at the moment, it's not what we agreed to for the past 2 cycles. And I think there's still not enough information here to really make a decision, because I have no idea if it's going to be $10,000, $15,000, $50,000 to remove it. It's not what we had looked at originally.
Any other comments, questions for Joel? Okay, thank you, Joel.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I recommend you download that app. It has every restaurant, everything, current calendar of events in our community. It's a great, useful tool. Good night.
Lee, yeah.
Yeah, just to the comment, I would make sure I understand procedurally what you're recommending. So the board did give some somewhat different direction to what was originally approved by the Redevelopment Authority, which is well within their purview to do, and direct staff to go out and look for this alternative under this funding. So while I understand it's not the original, just remove it and restripe it as was approved, it's certainly an approved project as is. So are you suggesting you would like to have more information on the finished product? I'm not sure, because I think right now the city's going to spend the money on removing the stripe, and then we're going to have the Kit Carson Trail as presented today.
Okay, that's the city, but that's not RAC funding.
It's with the redevelopment funding to remove the blue line as part of this
Okay, then why are we even discussing this?
Because you wanted it on the agenda to
No,
have
I
this
did want it
update.
on the agenda because it has been, for 2 cycles already. Who knows how many more cycles? And that's something we're going to be discussing further is, as we go down the line. That's why I had sort of wanted the other, the last item first, so.
Okay, any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, do we have a discussion for RAC? Questions? Okay, so we don't need a motion, Lee, then on this one, or?
Well, if nothing happens, the committee's going to continue to work with they're going to continue to work with Public Works to identify the timing of when the stripe should be removed. I guess if the RAC feels that those funds shouldn't be used for that and want something different, you can make a recommendation to the Redevelopment Authority to that effect.
Quick question. So then, from what I'm understanding, you're saying then we would get this $26,000 from fiscal year 2017 back?
It's all carried forward, so it would be, if it's not used for this, it goes into the pool that's available now.
I think in that case, then I make a motion to approve the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding the funding of the blue line replacement through the historic district.
Is that do we need a motion, or?
Sure.
That's a motion.
Yeah. I'll bring an update to the Board of Supervisors either way, so based on this discussion, so I can take a motion, that's fine.
Do I have a second? No? Okay.
The only thing, from a discussion point of view, is that I'm not sure how we can approve anything that we do not know. Yes, I asked this to be put on only because it was carried over twice, and we've never had an update in 3 years or whatever it is. And now we're getting an update, but it's completely different from what it was originally. And we do not have any further information other than it's no longer the blue line. I don't know what's going on, truly.
I mean, personally, I'm satisfied that this is an improvement. I've never really been a big fan of the paint stripe and its current condition. So even when it seems to be painted, it's certainly sidewalks are replaced and pavers are replaced shortly thereafter, and so you have gaps. So I'm more, at the time I was more supportive of a more permanent solution. I think this is a good one, and building on the funding for the current for culture and tourism, I think we should just basically carry on as is in my opinion. So if there's any other disagreement, I guess we carry on to the next item. And we just let the project go according to the proposed motion, just allow it to continue. Okay, all right, thank you. Moving on to Meeting item Agenda 4B for possible action to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding funding for the Reimagined Space Public Art Project. Lee?
Okay, this is the second project update on some of the funding that's been carried forward from past years for the Reimagined Space project that was allocated for $10,000 in fiscal year 2018, so that's last year's budget. This is also a project that was originally a little bit different type of project with interior space art, kind of transformed over time based on the unavailability of spaces and some other things to some other outdoor art displays in the downtown area. So far, $5,000 has been spent of the $10,000 in an event, so there's $5,000 remaining, and Mark Salinas is here to give you an update on where this project stands.
Thank you, Lee. I'm wondering if we could switch over to my screen, please. Great. Mark Salinas, Arts and Culture Coordinator for Carson City. Happy to be here tonight, and happy to have seen many of your faces at some recent events that I've put on. Wanted to walk the Commission through what is the Reimagined Space. I know there are some new commissioners on board, and I want everything to be crystal clear, and I have someone here from the President of the Boys and Girls Club who will speak to my presentation once I'm done. So, in February of 2017, the Visitors Bureau had solicited the board for $10,000, which you will see. Number 2, it says Reimagined Space Public Art Program for $10,000 there. I am now administering this as a city employee. March 2018 was the first half of the project, and I have a report on that as well as a report upon the second half for you tonight. In Redevelopment District 1, on the corner of Proctor and Stewart, there's a vacant commercial property with a westward-facing wall. This wall is visible from any of the pedestrians walking up and down our newly furbished Carson Street. This is a picture of it here. The Reimagined Space program was an initiative to address vacant and blighted commercial properties, to use an artistic intervention with the community to make something that was more of an asset than a detriment to Carson City. As you can see here, there's lots of abandoned gasoline canisters, broken glass, abandoned wood. The wall has a dirtiness to it that's not inviting. When I was in Elko at a convention, I met an artist actually at the Visitors Bureau, introduced me to Dion and Trish Reynolds. These are photographers, and they do large-scale photographic wheat paste works on abandoned and vacant commercial properties. These are considered temporary works, but these are all their own photography. And this is what you see here. This was in Elko in 2017 when I met them. Dion Reynolds is a renowned photographer. He has works in the collection of the Nevada Museum of Art. He's had works in the Senate Rotunda in Washington, D.C., and he's a former board member of the Nevada Arts Council. This is a screenshot of his website. I reached out to Dion and Trish regarding this Reimagined project. Now, being a Department of One, I have to be cognizant of my capabilities, and I try to connect the dots and make my motions as efficient as I can. I had also received an NEA, National Endowment of the Arts, Big Read grant. It's a federal grant. And in wanting to sort of stack these two opportunities, I wanted this Reimagined Space project to ride the coattails of this federal grant, which was a 30 days of custom events here in Carson City. That being said, the Big Read grant was 30 days based upon a Western novel. This fit well with Dion and Trish's eye, their aesthetic, and he took a survey of that wall and said that he would love to do his largest wheat paste yet. They are living in Eureka. When I went to cordon off this wall, I met Mr. Beebe there, who's on the right. I told him a little bit about what I was doing and what was coming. And the next day when we went out there, he had creatively taken this pizza box and taped up "No parking, artist coming soon." So immediately there was a certain connection with the space. Here we are, myself, Dion, and Trish installing 13 panels of this black and white wheat paste. The image that you see here is made from a disposable 3-inch by 5-inch plastic camera. This is the piece as it exists today. And I think it makes, okay, so as part of our 30 days of events, we had a unveiling. This wall faces the brick, it faces Lee's office, it faces the Laxell building where many of the state employees for the Department of Tourism are housed. And we had a sort of an after-work happy hour there, allowing the artists to do a couple of tours to the public with live music there at a latte at the Nugget. And of course, Mr. Cardinal and Mr. Kennedy's casinos are also involved in those 30 days of programming with a card exhibition I held at WNC. But back to my point, I think an artwork like this makes an interesting intervention. Subsequently, the artists have donated the actual framed photograph that inspired this work. So not only did this this project from RAC create a large outdoor scaled asset for Carson City, but also created a piece that's now in our municipal art collection. So just to recap, Ropers was a temporary installation revitalizing commercial vacancy. It led to a donated work in the municipal art collection. I tied it to a federal NEA grant, riding on those 30 days of public programming. They're a state, regional known artist, and their exposure was added to the Reimagine Space project. It shows that we have such artists that want to invest in our downtown Carson City. I'm working with Rachel, the PIO for the city, to make a arts and culture department page on the carson.org website. So this work will be included on the art walk, as well as imagery and video of the work created. This leaves $5,000 of the $10,000. Here today we have a representative from the Boys and Girls Club who has applied and received a grant from the Nevada Arts Council for a little over $3,000, as well as another grant from Southwest Gas, almost $4,000. Katie Leo here reached out to me, entrusting me to put together a project, a public-private project that would reach out to another contingency of our community, which is youth. Seen here is San Francisco artist Kinda Kalindi. She is a Persian female artist. Her work is represented by galleries. She has done commissions for Facebook. She has done commissions for Google. She does 2D and 3D work, as opposed to the black and white Western work that you see from Trish and Dion. Her work speaks for another voice, and I think it's a very youthful voice. The act of mark making is very prevalent in this. So the public-private partnership that I propose, that's a lot of P's, for this second $5,000, for the Boys and Girls Club, a lecture by the artist, an all-day youth participatory workshop resulting in a work of art for the Boys and Girls Club. And then for Carson City, the same thing, an artist at a lecture at the Adams Hub, an adult participatory workshop at the Adams Hub, resulting in several outdoor vinyl window murals, I'm calling them, for vacant commercial properties in Redevelopment District 1 and 2. I'm also going to put on there a small outdoor painted mural. I'm going to walk you through this visually. In speaking with the board members of the Boys and Girls Club and the teens, they've reached out to me wanting to step outside their four walls and have an impact, a creative impact in the community. I think Kinda, who I've already reached out to, achieves that energy. As I mentioned already, she is a Persian female. I've reached out to my colleagues at the Reno Mural Expo, asking them how many of our two-dimensional outdoor art is made by female. It's currently 5%. And how many of that is made by a minority? 0. So I think this is another opportunity for Carson City to be a first. As I said, what I propose here are actual hands-on workshop where the community gets to develop these vacant properties. So here we have an example of a hands-on workshop. What I propose is actually taking sheets of white vinyl, having participants cut these shapes out of colorful pieces, and mounting them back onto these white sheets of vinyl. What this results in is something that we can install in a window. Here's an example. Vacant window, full sheets. Now, in putting together this image, I thought to myself, a full sheet really closes the door and says, no business here, right? So I played around with it. And I kind of like the idea of these maybe 2-foot diameter, 3-foot diameter circle discs. In the back of my mind, I'm always trying to connect the dots in our community. And I had this idea where if we were to make 30 or 40 of these discs made by members of the community, we could stagger them all throughout Carson City, not only in vacant properties, but there might be actual businesses that might be interested in putting one up in their window as well. This is outside, just right outside Redevelopment District 1. This is just north of Hacienda. But this is a wall that many of the parents drive by when dropping off their kids at Carson City. And of course, I want to be able to, spread a diverse voice of art throughout Carson City. And so what I would propose Kinda to do is to create a small mural on the smaller wall. And I think it would have the same sort of impact as Roper's does, where you can see the decay, but also the hope. I'm calling this Carson Connectivity in honor of Kinda Kalinda's cool name. But it's a private-public partnership. Community sweat equity actually revitalizes commercial blight. This wall here is also across the street from a senior center, so we could involve youth, adults, and seniors in this project. It invests in Northern Nevada and diversity of public art and who's represented. It can create a map of several locations instead of one. This is a national artist now investing in Carson City. And as I said before, with the help of Rachel, our PIO, we can get all this information, art walk, videos, and even the lectures included on our carson.org website. So that's the first and second installment there I'm presenting to you. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mark? Yes. Comments?
Yes, Mark, when you had originally presented with Joel for this whole reimagine, it was supposed to be for drapes and lights and the whole bit. It was never meant to be the actual art project with the artists and things. Whatever happened to that portion of it? Because, it was never meant to fund the NEA Big Read and all of that. That was never the original intent.
I'll speak to your 2 points. Firstly, the original proposal by the CTA, the Visitors Bureau at the time, February 2016, 4 months into my job, was for a project that was quite large. And as I've grown into my job and understand the other departments that I need to work with, the DA's office, Public Works, Risk Contracts Management, it became apparent to me that this was a job that needed to be streamlined for success. I never shy away from an ambitious, large-scale project, but if a project cannot be edited down into a successful reality, that tells me that it had bad beginnings. I feel that the projects that we've completed and the projects that have yet to be completed use creativity in a community way to achieve the same goals. A lot of the vacant commercial properties around Carson City, I just don't feel we're going to get someone to drive up and park the car and get out at these vacant plazas and stuff. I think what we really need is visual beacons where everything can sort of become a placemaking landmark. Speaking to the NEA grant, this certainly didn't fund that. What I did was use, I mean, the ropers could have easily have been a Manhattan skyline, which would have nothing to do with the big read. I simply chose an artist whose aesthetic matched something that was already happening here in Carson City. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, sort of. But that really was not the original intent, and I think that's what we're going to be discussing after. I mean, you're caught up in something here, Mark, okay? Because to me, this seemed more of an actual art project, which really should go to the commission, the Arts and Cultural Commission versus RAC. I don't see this personally as a purview of the RAC. And even at the time when you came with Joel, and you were right, you were new, you were following whatever it is that had to be. But he also said that he was going to be matching funds as well. And it was meant, again, for the vacant storefronts. I think we asked you at the time, or Joel, I should say, because there was no way of you knowing, is where were the vacant storefronts? And that is a question that I have again that I don't see. I think this is a wonderful project. I think working with the Boys and Girls Club is a wonderful project. What you have shown basically is outside of the redevelopment district for the most part. And, it would be nice to have had a list of the storefronts within the redevelopment district where you plan to have this wonderful art, by Kahinda or whatever. But I think that...
Well, I'd like to interrupt you just momentarily because the Ropers is in Redevelopment District 1, and the NAI Realty has agreed to work with me on finding. The only thing I showed you that in the second half that's not in the redevelopment district is a small mural that I would actually be willing to pay and would pay out of my own budget, so it wouldn't be out of the RAC money. And I'd be more than happy. I'm going to be honest with you, I need help too in finding these properties and getting in touch with the people. I've done my due diligence on actually trying to reach out to some of the property owners in that alley to get some wheat paste done in there. And unfortunately, it's a lot of waiting by the phone for these people to call me back. And if I could get the help of anyone there on the board and reaching these realtors, that would help me as well.
I think this would be a great project for the alley, frankly, more so than anywhere else. But I think the point is that this, and just like, this was a carryover from last year as well, it's a completely different project than what was originally intended or talked about. And I think we have to be a little bit more clear on this in the future, is if it's going to change as it did with the NEA Big Read, which I think you well know that you did a wonderful job with that. I think it should have come before the RAC Commission again, before funding, to say, this is a different opportunity now instead of just going forth. And the same way with the 5,000 now, it's more of an art project than something that would enhance, it's just different than it was originally. And I think there's got to be some rules and regs on that. And again, I'd like to see a list of all these vacant places in the redevelopment district before saying yes or no.
Any other questions for Mark? Go, John.
Yeah, I'm not too clear. You're going to bring in this artist from San Francisco, right?
The idea would be to bring in the artists for 4 or 5 days to do these
Right.
public workshops and to lead.
And then the workshop at the Boys and Girls Club, that art wouldn't stay there or would stay there? Because that is outside the district.
Sure. And the Boys and Girls Club, and Katie's here and can speak to this, is actually matching more money than the RAC is. So they're going to have their own workshop and their own lecture, and they're going to have their own artwork inside their club. The RAC will have their own lecture and their workshop and their own artworks, plural, among many locations in Redevelopment District 1 and 2.
Right.
Any balance would be paid through the 1%.
Okay, so the art from the workshop at the hub would go throughout the redevelopment district.
Correct.
With the art that is done at the Boys and Girls Club, that is funded by the Boys and Girls Club, would stay at the Boys and Girls Club?
Correct.
Would any art be done there during that would also go into the redevelopment district, or would it all go out there?
I think there's certainly room for overlap here. We're all Carsonians, and so I think, with this type of work, I think it's possible.
Oh, you're absolutely correct, except I'm a Carsonite.
Carsonite, sorry. That's a little NYC left over.
Katie Leo, Boys and Girls Club, Western
Sorry,
Nevada.
excuse me. I have one more
sorry.
question for
Yep.
Mark and perhaps for Lee. Did you, in terms of when you went this other direction on the project, did you get a steer, or did you bring that in front of the Board of Supervisors to say that we're not using it for vacant storefronts or the infrastructure that Ronnie talked about, and we're instead going to do it for public art like this, or? I just don't know how much latitude you have.
I was in front of the RAC committee. I'd have to look at my notes. I would say a year ago. But I wasn't dedicating the entire project. It's a lot for one person to manage on one's own with. It's a hard forecast to tell because a lot of it depends upon which property owners are going to call me back. And some pieces I'd like to be site specific. And so if they don't call me back or if they're not interested, then I kind of have to start from scratch again.
All right, thank you. Okay, sorry, Katie, interrupt you.
Okay.
Please.
Katie Leo, Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club. John, just to answer your question, we've partnered quite a bit with Mark and the Arts Commission and the Visitors Bureau when Mark was there, and now with the city. Mark does an excellent job of taking my kids out into the community, and they have done a couple art walks and met artists. My teens in the art program, it's our #1 program at the Boys and Girls Club, actually. And they're excited to go out in the community and actually participate in this project. So Southwest Gas came to us and said, we want to focus on arts in the community. And how can we link youth and adults, so, kids and their families and other people in the community to bring an artist in and introduce art into the community. And so I called Mark first thing and said, what can we do? And so Nevada Arts Council jumped on board. They're really excited. And then I have dedicated money as well through the Boys and Girls Club. Through our arts program, we have a donor who is also participating that just happened. So what we're doing is the youth and the teens will actually do the art project to finish our front entry remodel. So we created a secure entry, and I have giant windows that you can see into in the club. So when you walk in, you can see all the kids, and part of it is creating a secure entrance. So we're actually using this project to finish our secure entrance, as well as give them an experiential hands-on project with an artist. They loved being able to go out. We did an art walk with our teens last summer, and Mark took them all over downtown, and something a lot of them had never done before, and they actually got to meet the artists. So they're really excited to actually participate in the community one as well. So that's all. We're just excited, and we're gonna do this regardless, even if we have to figure out a way to pay the artists, because this is part of what we committed to through the grants that we received from Nevada Arts Council and Southwest Gas.
So, given what Marcus told us, is there any interest in your part in having not only the kids go out into the community, but any extra art that is done during your workshop as well as the art that's done at the hub workshop coming out in the community, or is it all going to focus just on your
No,
secure?
I'm hoping we overlap. I'm looking forward to overlapping. I think the kids are really excited. We've talked to the teens about it. I have teens who participate in our national fine arts program through Boys and Girls Clubs of America and have won many awards for their beautiful artwork. And my art director displays art all over town. She's very creative, and so she's very supportive of this program. So we push our kids out as much as possible, and we don't stay within our four walls.
Great. I just wanted to ask this question because I know up here we have to worry about that redevelopment district,
Yep.
the
And it also
district
pushes
itself.
families who
Yeah.
wouldn't go out. So it gets our families out and actually downtown Carson City to see what we're doing.
Katie, I don't mean to be difficult. I think it's a wonderful project. I really do. And it's just that I don't think it's a RAC project. I really think it's an Arts and Cultural Commission project. And they receive $25,000 a year from the RAC to do whatever they wish to do with it. I just hate to open another Pandora's box, because this was never the original intent. The original intent was for lighting and piping and draping and not really anything with artists. So I think what you guys are doing is wonderful. It's just that, it just doesn't seem to be the purview of the RAC, is the bottom line, I think, is what I'm saying.
Which, again, I'm here for the kids, and so if there's money else, I'm going to go after whatever money is available to get my kids out in the community doing things. So
And you do a good job at that.
That's all I do all day long. So
Katie does, and thank you. And I'm here to push this project to a completion.
Any other public comment? Okay, any discussion or questions?
I guess for me, just a discussion, and I've heard Ronnie mention several times she doesn't think this is part of a RAC budget or committee or part of the redevelopment district. But and of course, I wasn't here, and what I'm hearing you say that this was probably made before some of the new members came aboard. But then the RAC committee approved the $10,000 that's been allocated to them for the year of 2018?
But that was for a completely different project. It was for infrastructure that was supposed to be going towards empty windows, empty retail space. So
Okay.
that's why the confusion. I mean, it was never meant to be this. If it comes back, and that's why it was carried over. And again, there's a component about putting this in empty windows. I'd like to know where those empty windows are. $5,000 in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. It's just precedent is being set. And it is an art project, and that is something that the RAC really has not been doing. It's provided the infrastructure.
Okay, and I do understand that, things can change in the middle of the stream when you have to look at, and first of all, Mark, let me thank you for bringing us up to date, and you and the lady from Boys and Girls Club. I actually support this circle disc and the diverse art, and I'm going to use your term, visual beacons in the community. I mean, to put, in my opinion, artwork at vacant stores or windows, and to his point, who's going to drive up to the window and look at artwork there, the empty building or dilapidated building? I think circles of disc will be something that we are actually educating our youth, getting our young people engaged and involved in art, because we have a lot of talented young people. And so why not show and display their artwork throughout the city? I'm pretty sure there will be businesses who are open, that's not closed or empty, that would love to have artwork displayed for the visual piece of it, and just to actually have the students to feel good about the work that they do. So, I mean, Mark, I support what you're committed. I know you're a committee of one, and what the Boys and Girls Club is doing. So I just wanted for record that I'm in support of what you are doing currently now. I don't think that the big sheets or the art or the wheat, what have you, in my opinion, really looks in a way that it would display artistry when we look at because you showed some good examples, and I like the circle disc, and I just think you're doing some hands-on workshop projects that's involving our youth, and that's what we have to do, is that we need to make sure we engage our young people and get them involved so they can feel good about living in Carson, and they feel like they have left their DNA footprint or something here so people can have this for years to see. Thank you.
Yeah, could I ask a question, perhaps of our DA representative here? I think Ronnie makes a good point that what we're doing here is we're looking at something that started out one way and it went to something else. And we have divided up the RAC money, or what it comes from the redevelopment businesses. Some of it for culture, and we handed that over to the Cultural Commission. Can we, or should we, do this? Is it legal to make that kind of a fudging over into another arena, although it's still for windows, and so it still has something to do with what we started out?
Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Barrett. I appreciate that. And thanks for putting me in the hot seat on my first time, staffing this committee. That's in jest, of course. Actually, while we were having this discussion, and I know that Lee, sitting to my right here, said that he wants to offer some additional information on the record that might, tie into this answer. So what I did was I pulled up on my phone, because I didn't bring my laptop with me tonight, the bylaws for this committee. And just as a refresher, not only for myself, but for the audience and the rest of the members here tonight, let me just read what I think is the applicable provisions of that. And this is under Article 3 of those bylaws that pertain to the duties of this committee and the responsibilities and, most importantly, the authority. And when I read authority, that's, in my view, jurisdictional authority of this committee, to act or not to act with respect to certain matters. The committee shall have the responsibility and authority to review projects and make recommendations to the Redevelopment Authority and Board of Supervisors, granting financial and other incentives such as those delineated in the Carson City Redevelopment District Incentives Program. The committee shall grant these incentives based on adherence to the Carson City development standards and other criteria established by the committee and approved by the Redevelopment Authority and Board of Supervisors. The committee shall have the authority to approve incentives established by the Redevelopment Authority and Board of Supervisors and delegated to the committee. So the way I read that is it's pretty broad language. So to answer your question, does this fall legally within the purview of this committee? I would say yes, it does. I think that the language as established in the bylaws provides some flexibility, and also there's language in there that relate to the board's authority in delegating certain responsibilities that it wants to task this committee with doing. So that's my answer, sort of off the fly or off the cuff, but the way I read that language is that it's not intended to be, and certainly does not read to me, when I review it as, I guess I would say, sort of a straitjacket effect. It really allows for some latitude and some flexibility, and I think it was probably written, to effectuate that intent. But, with that being said, Lee, of course, is a lot more versed with respect to, what happens and the functions of this committee, so I'll let him chime in if he wants to, add some more information.
Thank you. Lee's always happy to take on a hot potato.
No, going back, so when Vice Chair Justice asked his question about going before the Board of Supervisors, I started digging back through the files to see what had been presented in the past, and indeed, sometime between the last update to the Citizens Committee about what this project was and the Board of Supervisors. So the Board of Supervisors on March 15th of this year considered this year's budget. This was earlier this year. They were considering this year's budget. They had the same type of update that's in your packet for the next item, including for Reimagine Space. And I reference in here that it's not that project anymore that include purchasing the equipment, as Commissioner Hanneman had suggested that it was originally, and it referred to a report, report that Mark was giving to the Board of Supervisors that day, which I couldn't find on here, but presume that it was the new project. I don't think he had the specific art in mind, but it was an update to the board that the project had shifted from what it was before to this art displays on vacant buildings if they can't find vacant buildings to put it in as hadn't been intended before. So to that extent, I moved forward with, I mean, you could look at me and I'm looking for direction from the commission tonight, but I went forward with the project based on that's what the board had seen it and understood that it was something different, allowed the funding to go forward. So that's where we are with this project now. And also, as he was doing this, I was thinking it's not the purchase of equipment anymore, although the next phase is actually closer to what the original project was, which is art displays inside vacant buildings, which is what the target is. But I just hope that helps kind of the timing of what did happen. I mean, this is certainly not buying the things that it was originally approved to buy, but to, again, back to your question, the board was presented information that they knew it wasn't that project
And
anymore.
I recall, and to be fair to Mark, I do recall the presentation of the wheat paste as a proposal as part of this. And I personally feel that's consistent with, well, the second as a follow-up meeting, I recall, and he showed this is what was planned, and I feel that is consistent with the same concept. It's vacant property, it's a disused space. I don't disagree with Mike at all about the validity and the value of this project to the city as a whole. My main concern is that it seems like there's a latitude to just kind of we allocate the funds and then it gets spent in different ways and not necessarily focused on the redevelopment authority, which is what we have some concerns about. So,
and I want to thank Lee because I had that vague recollection, but it was just, it moved through the Board of Supervisors as one item on that day. But I had the vague recollection that he had talked about it some. We didn't spend a lot of time on it, as I recall. I do understand Ronnie's concern because this committee has always talked about, let's get away from this kind of thing and go towards infrastructure things. And so that's why I think she talks about Fuji Park speakers and, electronics, so that they can have a better sound system out there, et cetera. And I understand her feelings regarding the fact that we already took some RAC money and gave it over to the commission. But at the same time, I do feel a little bit like Michael. This is a good project, and so I'm kind of intrigued by it. It is still an idea for windows, as I understand it. It's just not buying the infrastructure. So I'm trying to have it both ways here, Ronnie.
Right. I think what I'm trying to say is that it's automatically rolled over without coming back to clarify what the project is. And again, I have no angst with it. It's just now in this budget cycle where it was in the other budget cycle and had not been spent during that cycle. So I guess, maybe this is the way it goes, but that's part of our next discussion is how should we go further. You'd get no updates or whatever. Maybe we don't need updates. Maybe that's not what it's about. But I think, knowing what the vacant buildings are is very important, and keeping it in with the redevelopment zone is also very important. Otherwise, why have a RAC committee to go through this process and just not go straight to the Board of Supervisors and just get it done?
I might offer a suggestion. The $25,000 that RAC has kindly given to the Cultural Commission has been mentioned a few times, and I would like to mention that I have put in place criteria, eligibility, as well as a final report. So that's what we're doing on our end, so that Lee and I make sure that the money, that $25,000, is being spent for what it's given. I've attended February 2017, when applicants came from the audience and on a fly made proposals. I might advance a larger proposal that such requests have a final report on your end so that this is avoided. Does that make sense?
Well,
The accountability, so to speak.
That would be great.
And I think that's what we're looking for, just like some reassurance that this is, it's like what the project's, it's a bit like the Blue Line. What it starts out as, it just doesn't evolve on its own, that there is kind of our feedback and our ability to even change the funding levels or withdraw it if we don't feel it was with meeting the initial intent.
Can I make a suggestion at this point? So I actually think the information that is presented is actually adequate at this level to go forward with funding. For many projects like this, you don't go forward and spend a lot of time to find the exact units. I can see if that's important. I mean, maybe knowing the exact units where they're going to be can be important in some cases, but you want to know, as city staff or whatever it is, or your contractor, whoever, you want to know you have the funding available before you spend a lot of time and effort to get to the finish line, which is, the finish line is actually having those spaces. So from that standpoint, I think you have the information. This is the type of information you'd have when the funding's being requested. Now, on the other hand, I think this is also a little bit different project, and I was over there asking Mark if the timing was right, if you feel that this is enough of a different project that you're not comfortable with continuing with the funding, make a recommendation to the board. It could be to the Board of Supervisors by their first meeting in September to decide if they want to use redevelopment funding for the project that it is now.
I might add also that if you look at, this is a screenshot of what was approved by the board February 2017. These are all static purchases. It's a speaker, it's a projector. These are, you look it up in a catalog and it is what it is. The money's spent, you buy it. This project is a different beast here, and it requires a little bit more latitude.
Well, Mark, I can't help but, again, go where Ronnie's trying to go. And what she feels, I think, I don't want to speak for her, and I'm sure other members up here have the question in their head. If the commission has $25,000 for cultural matters and art matters, and the RAC has, let's just say an equal amount, whatever, and wants to spend it on infrastructure, you get where I'm going. It becomes a gray area, at least.
Lee, to sort of go to your going before the Board of Supervisors, I don't think it's necessary for $5,000 to put this on an agenda. They've got much bigger fish to fry than a $5,000 expenditure for an art project. My point strictly is that this is an art project, should be before the Arts and Cultural Commission, which is now basically funded as well through the hotel room tax. So there is money there, period. I have no heartburn either way. For me, it's a procedural thing, is we are rolling the monies over again where it was all allocated for last year, and I have a problem. I have heartburn with automatically rolling over monies.
Well, I think, I agree with that, and except I think that they've allocated all of the arts and culture funds for this fiscal year now.
Yeah, but that's not even the point. It's just, I think it's that we have to have people come back and not just roll over. And you were talking about, they can proceed with funding. I've watched enough of the proceedings of the Board of Supervisors where they will not approve anything unless it has had, basically it's been vetted for contracts, et cetera. I mean, you're not going to award a contract without knowing what it is and how much it's going to cost. So I don't know. That may be a moot point. I don't think I really need to, go any further with this. It's just a procedural thing that I think it's a wonderful project. I'd like to see it, but I'd like to see it all over the redevelopment district and go from there.
So may I ask, so would you like to see it with this funding? I totally appreciate and understand this is a lesson learned in terms of how we address and approve funding with thresholds and triggers in there and substantial compliance or coming back. But I think a couple of things, you can come away doing, I think I'd like some direction at this point. Is this in enough compliance? Do we go forward with the project like this, or is it being kicked out as it's not the project anymore and go find other funding? I think I'd like that direction.
The NEA Reed was not in compliance with the original intent, and that was funded. So I'm not sure how, we can be up here and say, don't give him the $5,000, it's all for the kids kind of a thing. I don't think we're going to be that nasty, but it's just, I think from here going forward, it's done, what is done, it's done. Same way with the Blue Line, but I do think that going forward, there needs to be better guidelines.
We're making recommendations. That's why I was asking about the Board of Supervisors, because I know they intervened in the Blue Line, so we had that update, and then once they override us so effectively on that, so that's fine. But yeah, I don't have a big problem with this. I just ask that the project just maintain that this money is redevelopment areas, and it goes there and tries to do what it was doing. Not necessarily circles in active buildings and things like that. It's just different from what we talked about. But for future projects, we need to vet them a bit differently and say that it's this project and it shouldn't diverge. If it starts to diverge from the intent or the delivery, then we need to talk about it again before we spend the money. Anything further on this, or should we move on? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marks. Thanks, Lee. So, moving on to agenda item number 5, discussion only. A, staff reports and updates on matters relating to the RAC. Lee? Oh, sorry, I've skipped agenda item 4C. Yes, 4C. Item 4C, for discussion only, to provide an update on redevelopment funding allocations for fiscal year 2019, to discuss potential projects for funding in fiscal year 2020, and to discuss policies related to funding various projects, programs, and events.
Thank you. And again, this is I purposefully put this item on there as broad as possible to talk about our allocation plan, budget, and funding, and the policies related thereto. So, as it's laid out in the staff report, there's an update on the current projects that are funded and in the allocation plan for this year and future funding. This would be a good time to start to talk about new projects that you might consider for funding in future years. I'll pull up the allocation spreadsheet here in a second, and then we can also talk about the funding policies. I'm not going to go through individually all the update on each of the projects individually and give you the updates. They're in the staff report. I would just point out that I've highlighted on the screen up there, shaded the projects that are rolled forward from last year. It includes the two we just talked about, the reimagined space and Blue Line. The other one is the downtown gateway signage. Just a quick update on that, because that was recently authorized for funding for design of gateway signage. Since that last update and since that money was awarded, the city was awarded a federal transportation grant to be able to complete the remainder of South Carson Street between 5th Street and Fairview. So the project was going to be just from Fairview to the South Carson line, and then the other part was going to be the future. So it's able to be completed to that. So with that construction going on, it opens up more signage opportunities. So what you'll probably see coming back to you in terms of design work for that is a smaller alternative that includes just using this funding, but also potentially some other larger signage, gateway signage. Looks like they're considering a roundabout at Stewart Street as part of the grant that was which is an opportunity we have. I don't know if I've mentioned it to all of you in the past, but we have a couple of the arches from the old roundhouse from the Lockyer, from the property right downtown here. Where am I now? Yeah, really close to here. But it might be an opportunity to incorporate those arches into some gateway signage down there. So we're looking at some wider alternatives, so we're not rushing in to just put some of this less expensive signage up necessarily, but we'll take a little bit longer through this design process to look at some alternatives that may involve kind of looking for some other funding to do some better gateway signage. And then the other one that's rolled forward is the portable event sound system. I think that was added sometime within the last year, and I've told them, I've talked with Jen and Eric Klugen here that he's got some picked out. So I've given him the go ahead and order that, so we can get that purchase off the books. I'll leave that up, and again to policy. So we've talked about some things in general, and as I have in here, we've historically in redevelopment not put these time limits on things. You're going to do the project, have the funds, and the project goes forward. There's exceptions. The facade improvement program has time limits specifically in there. They have to meet those time limits. So. And things can take longer, like the signage. Maybe we're going to design something, the design's going to take longer, but I completely agree that we should start putting time limits on when the funds should be expended, or come back to the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee for an update or to reauthorize for an additional period of time. It's within your authority now. It's just something we haven't done in the past. We can make those recommendations going forward. I think it's just something we need to be more attuned to. These projects in particular have kind of highlighted the need to do that and have better updates and what the project is on a more frequent basis, if nothing else. But we can put time limits in there that put that threshold so they come back to you. And I'd recommend that. But again, so the discussion is kind of open. You're welcome to ask questions and discuss anything related to the allocation plan and funding policies there too.
It would be my thought on this whole thing is just having checkpoints on these projects. Every few months they have to come back, or whatever we decide. They need to come back and kind of give us an update of where they're at, what they've implemented, and we can kind of check against what they've came to us for in the beginning. That way, if it gets too off track, we can adjust at that point. But, I
think that those are examples where that didn't happen in a timely enough manner that they got to be something different. I agree. Thank you.
The other question I think that we have to ask is, some of the organizations do have the ability for grants. That should be like the first thing to ask. Is there another way for you to get any monies? Because we do not have an overabundance of money in the redevelopment account to fund everything. And I think that roundabouts, all of that goes within what the original intent in 1986 of creating the redevelopment district was about, is to do the bigger projects, not the little ones that suck up a lot of money, and then you have nothing really to show for it.
Any other comments or questions on this item? I have. Sorry. Go ahead.
Just real quick on that up there too. I was going to note that it would be, so your next scheduled review of this, just to talk about timeline, your next scheduled review of this is in November. That's when you really start to think about projects that should go into the next year's budget so that we can get some information, and it's February when you take that action. And I'm hoping by November we should have updated numbers onto any funds that have rolled forward, any budget savings or revenues that were unknown. Hopefully there's some funds there. As you can see in the plans, basically anything that's been budgeted for this year is already allocated and to projects, so there's nothing to modify this year unless some additional revenues unanticipated come in, and then we'll adjust it out. So that's just the timing of what you can expect I don't need recommendations tonight, but be happy to start to consider them if you have any suggestions.
I had just one general comment, kind of on future projects, especially on the event side. One is that I was at the Carson City Fair, and they have, well, that's one thing. We can come to that later. But they have T-shirts, and I've noticed other events that RAC is providing money for, or the Redevelopment Authority is providing money for, but Culture and Tourism gets their logos on the back of shirts and on programs, and Redevelopment Authority doesn't have any visibility. And I don't know if that's in terms of, I remember you making a comment, Lee, that said redevelopment is not popular. This redevelopment funding is coming from businesses and people in the district, and maybe it's better if we have some visibility about where their money's being used, so they're perhaps more supportive of the concept. And it was also around the same thing with facade improvement, which is largely behind us, but it seemed to me that we should have said this project was co-funded by Redevelopment Authority, something like that, or ongoing basis that it is there, that it's like that's like a little small plaque. Those kinds of things in the future might be helpful for us. I don't know if we have a logo, if there is a logo for the Redevelopment Authority. I'm not saying the RAC is necessarily doing it, but, every time we put money in it, we're not nowhere to be seen. So that could be the 4th of July events. I'm not sure if that's how that's being.
I think the 4th of July, for example, has put it in there. We do the Christmas program. We always credit redevelopment on that for the funding. I think I've seen it, but I know what you're saying is it would be nice to say this is a project of the Redevelopment Authority. Because that's what it is at the end, a sign that goes from building to building. So I think that's an excellent idea.
I don't know, that costs money, but I assume there's a small amount of money. But
But
it's like a
I could look
condition.
into that to actually just implement that with the facade improvements that are coming up.
Or just, it's just as a line in your application, it says one of the terms and conditions is if if you have any branded material that we're on there somehow, or the city is on there at least, even if it's not specifically authority. Are there any other comments or questions, Ms. Sun? No, share yet?
I see here that there's an assist with the William Street corridor project. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So I think it was two years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago, that the 8-cent sales tax was implemented to complete the animal shelter, the MAC, Multipurpose Athletic Center, and corridor improvements, including the downtown and all the other corridors. It's funding allocated specifically to those projects. It's not funding. It's not complete funding for the entire corridor projects, but it's partial funding, and then the other funding needs to be found. So what's planned, we've done the downtown now, is being completed. South Carson Street's next. So William Street and North Carson Street are other projects. For the William Street in particular, it's next on the list after South Carson Street because a couple years ago, the EPA, we got a grant from EPA to do a study project. So we actually have a document now that I'd be happy to share with you that has some concepts for William Street.
So then along those same lines, will that be like a Plan 3 and a Plan 4 for the RAC for redevelopment?
Will it be a new redevelopment area?
Phase 3 and 4, how we have phase 1 and 2.
Oh, area 1 and 2. So part of William Street is in redevelopment area 1, all the way to the other side, almost to Solomon. So past up to Mills Park, it's in the redevelopment area 1 path.
So I just wanted to highlight that some of the areas then that Mark was telling us about are actually within that redevelopment district. Some of the windows that he was talking about are in that area because those were some of the buildings that I recognized as being in that area. So they were still in the phase 1.
Lee, what is the update on the facade program? Because we have $50,000 in for the next quite a while, 5 years. And are you receiving any applications at all?
So I haven't had any inquiries for this year, for this year's. If anybody has any suggestions, if there's any buildings that particularly need it, we could reach out to them. It's not much because once you get a couple applicants, that really want to do something, it'll eat it up, or it could just be painting like Dave Shriver did, which was just a $10,000 little facelift, and so that's $5,000 of redevelopment funds or so. So if you have any suggestions on how to outreach or any, send them to me or give me the contacts, I'll get to them. But I think that's the next plan for me, is to start looking for those opportunities and get the word out. So basically most of last year's was allocated. We allocated with the last one being the Greenhouse Garden Center.
Okay, we basically have gone one street off of Carson Street, which is Curry. Can we go deeper into behind Curry, like on Nevada, or if there's any other businesses that need to look better within the historic district? I'm thinking like the Brewery Arts Center or some of the other places.
I think what it says is any commercial property. So it could be a residential office property, it could be something. It's not just limited to Carson Street, yeah.
Question concerning that. So, I mean, it's a good idea that we can bring to your attention of those businesses who need some assistance with their facade. But do you think that the business owners, and for those who own business, are they familiar and know that the RAC committee can assist them in that? I mean, what is our way of getting the communication out to the businesses as opposed to us going out and, okay, they need some work done, and bringing that to you? I would think that we would want to do a better job in communicating that information to the business owners so they can see what's some of the work or what the work that the RAC committee is doing.
Right, and I agree. So thus far, in the past, we've had enough applications come in by just without significant outreach to use up almost all of the funds that are available for it. I think we're getting to the point where those people have already come in that knew about it, and the next step is to reach out further. And I think the next step, if there aren't particular ones that somebody has in mind and bring to us, then the next step's going to be a more of a wider distribution of either by mailing or, Ann Knowles is really good about putting things in the appeal for us too, if there's information like that funds are available.
And Ann is here this evening too.
And often for a lot of these announcements, we'll reach out through the Chamber of Commerce for them to send it out as well.
I was going to thank Ann. That's how the media was. This was a bigger story a couple of years ago when we were doing things. So thank you for our friends in the media for that. I was just going to comment on the photos that Lee put up there. This is the rack tent at the Carson City Fair. I took photos of them. So they've got animal events, and it was very welcome on those days. So it's unfortunate it was a rental. It's a very nice tent, and it would be nice to have that as a permanent infrastructure. But that we are where we are with that. But it was the organizers were very thankful of that contribution as well. Okay.
Nice update.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, and we don't need to make a motion or anything on this? You're just taking the comments? Okay. Okay.
So you want to tell us sort of what we said?
Should I ask for public comment? I'll ask for public comment as well, if there is any.
No, I was trying to think of something clever, Ronnie, sorry. No, I mean, I think I think these two prior projects, again, were kind of a learning experience of what we need to do to make sure we have trigger points, keep them focused on what the project is or bring it back. And I think that just needs to be, from my side, coming to you, is to include those recommended conditions. So you're aware of them and can think about what those timeframes are based on that specific project, and put time limits or project changes coming back to RAC. I mean, I think what I'm going to recommend as these come forward is that let's say it's the Reimagine project that they have used 1 year, and for an extension come back to RAC and not necessarily RAC and then the Board of Supervisors, just to streamline it a little bit. That'll be up to the Board of Supervisors to give us that direction, but I think that's probably the recommendation I'd make going forward on projects like that.
Go ahead.
The other recommendation, I had never really taken time to read the the redevelopment for Carson City Redevelopment Project 1 that was inaugurated in 1986. And for the new people, you can download this on carson.org under Community Development. It was a very easy read, very interesting, and it really put things in perspective. And some things like, I don't know why we were doing some things, because it was never really in the original intent of what this was. And this document is current, and it does sunset in 2031. So if you've not read the document, I would suggest that you do.
So is there any public comment on this particular item? Okay, please, come forward.
I'm Bradley Harris. I've just come to talk to you a little bit about the Bury Art Center, and I was happy to hear Ronnie talk a little bit about it a minute ago. I just want to say that I'm just a member of the Bury Art Center. I basically go to their concerts and drink their coffee, so I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm just here as a citizen saying I think they've kind of earned the respect of the city. They've been through kind of a tough time with some difficulties a few years ago. I know that Gene Barrett helped pull them out of the ditch. We now have Gina Hill operating the place as a manager. We also they are about to finish up their first audit, real clean nonprofit audit, and that should be done next week. And the Art Center gets a lot of support from the arts groups around and from the citizenship. So that's not really the problem. It's not support. It's not public support or being seen as a good arts organization. They are. The problem is the infrastructure. As you know, arts organizations don't pay for new roofs. And the Bury Art Center has on their performance hall, the old church, has a roof on there right now that is leaking pretty good. The numbers that have been kicked around in terms of what it'll take to fix that are somewhere in the territory of $100,000, and they don't have that in their budget. Let's put it that way. There are other things that need to happen there, like the Bury building itself has, there's facade work on the back sides that need to be completed. But I think the most urgent thing right now would be this roof. And I just come and say, can somebody give me some ideas, basically? Is the Redevelopment Commission the right place to be? Or is it way outside the bounds of what you do? And I'm certainly not saying we need to get $100,000 from you, because we wouldn't expect that. But it'd be great if we could get a beginning. You may ask, why does the roof cost $100,000? It's because it's covered in asbestos. Those are asbestos shingles. That's the bad news. The good news is that's just a rough number. And I keep saying again, I'm not part of the management or anything. I'm just sort of part of the thinking around this. But we would certainly work hard on the quotes with the contractors to get a more reasonable dollars for that. And there are other places to go to find the money, but it would be great if we could find a way that the RAC could contribute. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, I probably don't have any answers, but I'll at least tell you that I don't.
Any questions for Ms. Harris? Oh, okay.
I think Lee, you might want to address that.
Well, I'll contact Gina.
Yeah, Gina.
Yeah, I'll try to get some more information on that. I was going to say it's not a facade improvement. We've made clear that roofs are not part of the facade improvement program, so I know there's not. We made that clear after that, yeah.
But it would fall. I mean, they're in the district.
But it is in the redevelopment district. So I'll follow up with Gina and get more information to bring back to this group.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, any further public comment? Seeing none, now we will really move on to item 5, for discussion only, which is first A, staff reports and updates on matters relating to RAC. Lee?
I talked about the future allocation discussion, the timing of those. I did want to mention, so I've talked to Mike Riggs with the Downtown Business Association. They may come in with a special event permit for Nevada Day weekend. There's funding available, so it's kind of as you come, they can still submit. So I might poll you this week to see who's available the first Monday in September. I think that was September 3rd if we needed to have a special meeting. But other than that, I don't have anything else to report.
So that covers A and B then? I guess, okay, so C, RAC member reports and comments.
I just want to mention that the Jazz Festival is going on, kicked off on Friday night. A lot of stuff going on. I should have brought the card. Also, thanks to, I guess, Redevelopment, if you want to put it that way, the U.S. Air Force Band of the Golden West, the Jazz Commanders, will be here on the night of the 17th, and the tickets are free. So if anybody wants tickets, they need to come by the chamber, and we'll give you your tickets. We still have some left.
I want to thank Member Smith for starting a new event in our Redevelopment Authority District 1 without requesting any funding from us, which is very nice, and I'm sure it's bringing lots of people. How many people came to your first event?
We had 21.
Excellent.
Exceeded my expectations. I was thinking maybe 10 or 12, but 21 showed.
Excellent. Any other comments, reports? Okay, thank you. So public comment, item 6. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Redevelopment Authority Citizens Committee, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Public comment, seeing none. Move on, item 7 for possible action, adjournment. A motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.